Hello and welcome back to the channel. I just wanted to do this video over so I can help you all understand how to best start with gardening, and this is understanding fertilizers, the basics, understanding the soil, what to look for, how to make sure you are choosing the right options, which ones are OMRI listed, what exactly the purpose of OMRI listing is. So let's get started. Now, for all plants, especially when you're gardening in containers, you want to make sure that it's receiving enough water and that it is getting enough nutrients. Now, initially when you are gardening, what you want to do is to figure out what type of soil it is that you're going to use. Now, for me, I use the Kellogg's all natural raised bed and potting mix, and I use it because it is OMRI listed, and this is what you're looking for when I say OMRI listed. It's about 2 cubic feet. It will fill up a whole 5-gallon container, and you'll have more to fill up half of another 5-gallon container. Why I like this is because products that are OMRI listed, for me, they tend to allow your plants to grow a lot differently. Let me get that out of the way. To grow a lot differently. It grows better. When I started with another brand of soil that was not OMRI listed, I found that it just was different. My plants didn't grow the same way. It took water differently. It was just not up to my liking. So I just believed that it was not organic enough, and I wanted to make sure that I was paying attention to what was going into my body. Now back to the point. We have the Kellogg raised and potting mix, raised bed and potting mix. It's an organic, and you have to look for the OMRI listing. So if you don't necessarily go with this specific brand, looking for something that's organic or OMRI listed is great. Why I look for products that are OMRI listed, as I said before, it's just because it means they've spent some time making sure that they're up to the standard of OMRI, which is make sure the plants are good for the environment, it's good for your body, and it's just pretty much not causing more harm than good. Now, we also, in terms of fertilizer, my basic is the Black Cow. And I like this one because it helps whenever I put it on top as a topsoil or put it on top of my existing soil, just before I water it. By the end of the week, my plants start looking a lot greener. I see changes, they look a lot healthier, and that's what I like most about the Black Cow. It just basically maintains a certain level of well-being in your plants. And on top of that, we're going to talk more about the 0.5, 0.0, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. It's just essentially telling you how much nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium is in your soil. So this stands for N for nitrogen, P for phosphorus, K for potassium, NPK, and that's what it stands for. Now we'll talk more about that. But in terms of mixing my garden soil, I usually use, for the most part, 70 or 80% soil to the rest being cow manure. This is just because it helps your soil to get more nutrients in it, right? So that's something you can think about. Look for OMRI listing. Now, the Black Cow is not necessarily OMRI listed, but I've used it and I have not seen very much harm come to my plants. To my eye, my plants are thriving with it, especially my high nitrogen feeding plants. They do well with the Black Cow, even though the nitrogen content in it is low, but it just flourishes when I use it on my plant. So when you're mixing your soil, you want to use 70 to 80% of that, and the rest being cow manure. Now, if you don't want to use cow manure and you want to go to a more organic option, then I see the mushroom compost that I just now started using. This is the mushroom compost. I believe this one is OMRI listed as well. Let me make sure. This is the mushroom compost. It is not OMRI listed, actually, but you can always find a version that is OMRI listed, and you can use this in the place of cow manure if you want a more vegan option. So I really like this one. I've seen similar results with my black cow. All right. Another option to add to your vegetable beds is worm castings. This one is OMRI listed, as you can see. Now I'll add some of this just to top up the nutrients. So if I use 80% soil to 20% cow manure, I'll just add maybe like a small amount of this in the soil, because it really does well for my vegetables. And I will be doing some fall gardening, so I will definitely add it to the soil. And it goes a long way, because this was like $35 on Amazon. As you can see here, the content version of this, it has 1 nitrogen, no phosphorus, no potassium. And for the mushroom compost, it's 40 pounds. It has 0.5 for nitrogen, 0.5 for phosphorus, 0.2 for potassium. Now, I hope that was helpful and not confusing. Now we're going to talk about the actual fertilizers, additional fertilizers, the more specific ones: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Right? Here we go. I can't get this to stay steady. Look at that. All right, now these are not OMRI listed. It does say it's organic. You can always just look for ones that state that they're organic. But these are your 3 main nutrients. Now, to understand it better, bone meal is usually what nitrogen is presented as for your soil. Blood meal is usually what nitrogen is presented as for your soil. Bone meal is usually what phosphorus is presented as for your soil. And then potassium is presented usually in langbonite. I hope I pronounced that right. And this one here is OMRI listed for the potassium. The others say that they're organic, but they are not OMRI listed. All right, now let's talk about it. Now, usually at the back of these containers, if you're not sure, it tells you how to dilute it or how to apply it to your soil. So for me, for the blood meal, the bone meal, and the langbonite, what I do is I focus on which one is needed most. So when plants are just growing and they're needing that strength, that's when you focus on the blood meal or the nitrogen. As you can see, NPK, it has 14 counts of nitrogen in here, no phosphorus, no potassium. You want to focus on nitrogen when the plant's starting to grow, and the instructions usually are on the back. You can apply it in 2 ways. You can add it directly in the soil when you're preparing the soil. That is when you're mixing the soil with the cow manure, and then you add some of this in there, especially for your tomato plants, vegetables, pretty much for most plants. You'll add blood meal or nitrogen to it. In addition to that, once the plant starts growing and you need it to establish strong roots, that's when your bone meal comes in, right? Or your phosphorus. So nitrogen when it's growing, all through the growth, but initially you need a lot of nitrogen. For the bone meal, you use it when you're focusing on getting strong roots and it's in the earlier stage of development. As your plant starts to establish itself, you're going to keep kind of ease down with the amount of bone meal and blood meal that you add, or nitrogen and phosphorus that you add, and start adding more. That fell over there. Start adding more potassium. Now, the good thing with potassium is it helps your plant to start fruiting. So if let's say for my banana plant, the potassium is what you'd add more abundantly in the latter stages of growth. Now, if you've already mixed your soil and you just want to fertilize it, most times what you do is dilute the fertilizer in water. And the instructions, as I said, is usually at the back of the container. So you would dilute it in water, and then you would use that water to water your plant. And when you're fertilizing an established plant that's already in its container, soil's already been mixed, you want to make sure you do it at nighttime, and don't overdo it where it's wasting away, because it does get expensive to keep buying these fertilizers. So you want to put just enough where it's completely saturated the soil, and then that is it. You do it at nighttime, anywhere from evening to about early morning before the sun comes out. And usually with these, it's so great that within a week you start seeing the results. You start seeing a difference. Another thing to look at when you want to figure out what works best is to actually do a soil test if you can afford to do that. That way you can know what the content is of your soil if you have actual soil where you live, or get the content of the soil that you're actually growing a larger tree in, right? I hope this video was helpful. I found that when I watched a lot of videos on YouTube, nobody really clearly explained to me, and I hope I did and I haven't confused you, what is required to actually plant the plants, get them to grow, what stages you add what, how do you add the fertilizer to it, what do they look like, where do you get them from. If you have any additional questions, do go ahead and let me know. I hope this was helpful, as I said before, and thank you so much for joining. You have a great day.